Has everybody got a handout? I think I'm going to be able to do this. Yeah. Oh, forgot. Going to go again. Okay. Question is, as we start this, we've been kind of heavily in the book of Romans, and I've even heard from somebody through somebody. Man, it's not practical enough. Okay, are we just ignoring the practical? Okay, are we doing things that don't have anything to do with our real life, and our real problems by studying the way we're studying? And I believe, and have come to believe more and more than I ever have before, that the most practical thing we can do for ourselves, for our young people, for all of us as Christians, is to be deeply in the Word. That's the most practical place to be. That unless we have that deep foundation of the biblical story, not just knowledge up here that we can say it and we can do that, but to live it and experience it, then everything that we're doing is chasing wind. Because this story claims to be the story of the world. The cross claims to be the solution to the world. Okay? Self-sacrificial, forgiving love claims to be the solution to the world. And you really can't find it many other places. Starting to see, but the Christianity has had an effect. Christianity is not as bad as the world says, and it's had an effect over the world, a cumulative effect over the world for a long time, two millennium. And but yeah, I don't think there's anything more practical we can do than to do the biblical worldview, because the biblical worldview is not a biblical worldview that you sit in a room and you go, we learned something and we know something. The biblical worldview is, now I know and internalize a view of the world, and it calls me to action, and I go into. First of all, I think the Bible calls us into ourselves, and then it calls us into the world, into the outside of us. And so, yeah, I just want to say that. I think this is one of the most practical things we can do because it sets the foundation for everything else we do, the foundation of every problem of life, and everything that happens in life comes and grows from this. We're about to launch the trauma program, right? Where does trauma originate from? Sin. It originates from sin. Either our own sin or someone else's sin that has been inflicted upon us, And sometimes it's just mysterious. There are times that it's mysterious, and why in the world is that happening? But anyway, here's my first proposition of this class. I think this is as practical as we can get because it's laying a foundation from which we do everything that we do. We think everything that we think. We act every way that we act. And God is offering a very comprehensive, intensive way of living in this world, It's not just a pocket. It's not just a partial, but the people that we become, right? So, yeah, that's the first thing I would say as I come to this class. The second thing is what we're doing right now, and the class is called The Mission of God, is we're simply taking the biblical worldview and we're looking from a different vantage point, okay? That's kind of one of my new words that you'll hear me say, that I introduced on Sunday. That it's the same thing, but we're kind of going, and I'm about to illustrate it to you. I don't know if it's a terrible example. Maybe it's a terrible example. And if it doesn't work for you, then, well, that's your problem. But no, I'm just kidding. Tell me to explain it another way. Tell me to find another way to explain it. But this is the illustration that I came up with. Eiffel Tower in Paris. Anybody seen the Eiffel Tower in Paris? Anybody in here been to Paris? Okay. Beautiful thing. I've been there 3 times. Yeah, it's an amazing structure. And you find yourself when you go through Paris, kind of looking around, and you can kind of orient yourself by the Eiffel Tower in most of Paris. Okay, it was really cool. I got to tell you all this. At White Station, where I worked, we had a missionary in Paris I can't remember, it was either Parish Church of Christ or it had a name. But anyway, the preacher there was an American, but he had married a Parisian lady. And then his name was Don, her name was Colette. And Don passed away suddenly with a heart attack. And White Station continued to support Colette and continued to give her. So one of the perks of being at White Station is you got to go to Paris sometimes, and you got to stay with Colette in her house, downtown Paris, go to the church there, and it was cool. Colette, amazing lady, she passed away last year. But, I have so many memories of, I stayed in her basement whenever I went to her house, and it was just like an 8x6 room. The bed barely fit in there, and you kind of had to get dressed outside. Her house was really small, as all houses were. And there would be a call down the stairs, bonjour, 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 Tommy, 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 Tommy. She would say, that's how she would wake me up in the morning if I wasn't already awake. And she would have hot baguettes and, it was unbelievable. Fresh flowers on the table, and she would take me around Paris and show me things. But anyway, Eiffel Tower, okay? Let's see if there we go. I'm having to do 2 things. So, Eiffel Tower, you can look at it from lots of different ways, right? You can see it from very many different vantage points. And in a sense, what I'm trying to say is that in biblical spiritual worldview, we've been looking around at the biblical spiritual worldview, okay? Represented by the Eiffel Tower here. You can see how big it is compared to the buildings around it, sometimes. And sometimes you can just see it and how big it is. And certain times of the year, you can see it through a bunch of flowers, And as you get closer and closer to it, it's just this big round iron grate. I mean, that's all it is, But you can continue to look around. This is underneath it at night, just looking up at the bottom floor. This is directly underneath it. When you're right in the middle of it, looking up like this at night, and that's what you see. Above you, there's a platform above you. And then, just some more views from the distance. It's got a big park around it. It's got a river next to it and all these things. And if you've been there, you also can add, the smells and all the food carts and vendors that are around and all the people selling coffee and tea and all these things and all the languages you can hear in Paris just walking down a street, and different cultures that you see. You see a lot of women with the hijabs on, in Paris, a lot of them, and just different sights and scenes around it. Okay, and so you get a lot of different perspectives of it. Here's one more. I keep doing the wrong thing. Here's one more. You can get a sense there of how green it is around it and the park that's around it and all that stuff. And at night, it's completely lit up, totally. Now, the biblical spiritual worldview is like looking at the Eiffel Tower. That's what we've been doing. We've been looking at it from different angles. We've got a pretty good handle on it, right? What it looks like, how big it is, the space it's in, all those kinds of things. And what we're about to do now in the Mission of God class is do something a little different. We're going to climb up the tower, and we're going to look out from it. Okay? That's kind of the introductory purpose of this class. We're not looking at it and walking around it and looking at it from over here and over there. Now we're actually on it. We're going to be contained in the worldview, in the frame of the worldview, and kept safe by its sturdiness and strength. And it takes getting used to the heights. okay? You get used to the heights. It's kind of, going up at a big, huge places like the World Trade Center or the Eiffel Tower, it kind of takes your breath away. It's kind of scary. I'm a person, like they've got these big observation windows, I'm a person who kind of stays 7 feet away from them, And you've got those people that just go stand right up against them and put their faces up against them, and I'm like, you're an idiot, But, man, the height, the views you can see, it's incredible. And so think of this class in terms of now, within the biblical spiritual worldview, we're about to see the scenery. We're about to see the view and see what's out there, okay? And so the second proposition of this class to me, by the way, an illustration, here it is from, and by the way, searching for pictures on the internet from the Eiffel Tower, I found 3. Looking at the Eiffel Tower, 25,000, okay? Not many people, take the time, and that makes the point of my second proposition of this class. We're not used to really doing this. Okay? We spend more of our time in our church, in a sense, looking at it. And then going over to this angle and looking at it a little bit more, and looking at it from here. And we learn something new and we see something. But once we experience and have a picture of the worldview, we climb on it, and the view we see is breathtaking. It's unbelievable. Does that illustration make any sense? Does that speak at all? And so, think of this class, first of all, as that what we're going to do, is we're on it. We're on the tower. And we're looking at the scenery, and we're looking at the expanse of what God is, kind of from his perspective, all right? Seeing it through his eyes, not seeing it through our eyes, but seeing it through his eyes, okay? But we now know we're on a safe and sturdy place. We now know where we're standing, and when we begin to put on those lenses of the biblical spiritual worldview. So, any comments, thoughts, questions, anything on that part? Yeah, please. I love them.
When we were at Epcot, and you have the nations you can go around to, and we went to Paris, and they have a new ride there, Ratatouille. Did I say that right?
Ratatouille.
And the restaurant, and it's like you're there. Right? It's how Disney does things.
Yeah.
And you get on the ride, and it's the new one where it's like you're floating. It's on a trackless cart, and all of a sudden you enter into the world of the mouse, and you shrink down, and you are the mouse running through the kitchen and the chef and the refrigerator, and everything's big.
Oh,
and it was amazing.
Yeah.
And you don't see things from that perspective. We see it from here.
Yeah.
So it just made me.
Oh, it's a great example, great illustration. And we live in a world and a day that we can do that. Where technology allows us to be entertained like that, and we do this thing. Yesterday in the movie Avatar, when we watched it in 3D, and I mean, you're in it. You're in it. There's stuff floating at you and around you, and stuff like that. So same thing. This is the picture we want to have in our head as we think about. The other thing I want to do tonight is just say, okay, what do we mean by the mission of God? There's 2 words there that we need to pay attention to when we do that. But this is the perspective. We're within the spiritual, biblical worldview, and now we're in it. We're not looking at it, we're in it, and we're looking at the scenery and looking at what it allows us to see and what it allows us to do when we go to the mission of God. Okay, first of all, let me begin by saying most of these, I had it on the front slide. This class is based upon the writings of a guy named Christopher Wright. Okay, And he wrote this book first, The Mission of God, Unlocking the Bible's Grand Narrative. I was going to just say about, but why don't I just tell you what year it was published? 2006. I was thinking about 15 years ago, a little bit off. About 15 years ago, he wrote this book. Man, everybody in theological schools had to read it, right away. As soon as it came out, first assigned book that everybody had to read. So that's the first time I read it. And then read it one other time for teaching a class in Heritage College in Ghana. And then now have picked it back up again for all of this and for my doctoral program as well. But this book is, it's really thick. It's heavy and so many good things and so many great things. But it is not a super easy read. It's not a super easy read. But Danny introduced me to a second book that this same guy wrote called The Mission of God's People. And he texted me a week or two ago, I think, and said, hey, did you know about that he's written this other book, maybe kind of a companion, maybe kind of a, and it's not completely a companion to it. I've read the first 5 chapters now of this. And it's not completely, he doesn't say, I'm writing a companion to this. And he even says in the introduction, please, I'm not trying to write a small version of this. He says, I'm taking the principles of this and I'm saying, okay, so what do we do as God's people? But based on the principles on the mission of God, how do we act and what do we do as God's people? And so it is more practical, so to speak. Yes, yeah. Yeah, he's contributed to a series of books on the church mission, and this part is the biblical theology of church mission, okay? And basically what it means to say the biblical theology of church mission is to say having a biblical worldview, looking at God, and based on what you see about God, doing what you're supposed to do. That's what that sentence means. And so, this class is going to be based on these. This one is a lot easier to read. It's a lot more practical, and it's a lot. But yeah, those are the books. But Christopher Wright, begin. He defines first of all mission. What's mission? Okay, you hear about people going on missions. Okay, both in church and both military people go on missions. Every company has a what? A mission statement. Man, they're on a mission. Okay, and he defines the mission, the word mission broadly as a long-term goal. There's a goal out here, okay, or purpose that's going to be accomplished. And it's how's it going to be accomplished? Through, it's, big words here, proximate objectives and actions. Through steps along the way, okay? My goal, I'm going to lose 100 pounds, okay? You're going to need some proximate steps. I'm going to have to make a plan of what I'm going to eat every day. I'm going to lose 5 pounds this week, and I'm going to shoot for 3 pounds a week. Those are proximate objectives and actions, but not just to be done. I'm not losing 3 pounds this week just to lose 3 pounds, because what? I'm trying to lose, here's the big goal out there, 100 pounds. And so he says that's the word mission, okay, in general, what the word mission is all about. Long-term goal or purpose, achieved through proximate objectives and actions. So when he says the mission of God, he says that God has a purpose, a goal, and that he accomplishes that through actions every day, action steps, and that's what we'll find when we go to the Bible. Any questions about that? Well, it didn't. Okay, so mainly one of the things we're going to do in this class is we're looking at our committed participation. We're not just trying to study the mission of God out there. We want to know, how do we be committed and participate as God's people at God's invitation and command in God's mission, whatever that is, okay, within the history of the world for the redemption of God's creation. And he's given some hints there about God's mission, okay? And so that's what we're doing in this class. A good teacher says at the beginning of the class, this is what we hope to do by the end of the class, you know? And then we take proximate action steps to go through the class. So the goal is we want as a church to be more committed to participation in God's mission because we're God's people, you know? And that mission, we want to know more deeply about that mission. It has something to do about God working in this world for the redemption of this world and the creation, you know? But we want to know more about that. But that's what we want to do at the end of this class. We don't want to say, man, we sure know a few more facts about the mission of God. We want to say, we're doing something. You know, we're doing something because of God's mission, that we find ourselves in the Bible, that wherever God does a mission, we're in it. We're not outside of it. There are people that are outside of it, okay? And that has something to do with what we're doing inside of it, you know? But we are claiming to be people who are right in the middle of it, right smack in the middle of God's mission, you know? So, yeah, that's what we want to do in this class. So, what is God's mission? Okay, let me go back and just use the broad term again. God's long-term purpose, okay, for creating a world is his mission. His original, the means by which he carried out his mission was he created a world. Okay, that's a big part of his mission. Is I need what he's going to use, and the language we're going to use later. He's going to have an arena that he works in, you know, and this arena where he works is this universe, this world. And we haven't talked about what exactly that is yet, that mission. But here's the story. God had a long-term purpose in creating the world. So he created that world. His step one, I guess, or maybe step 1 through 7 was creating that world. Okay? And he had a goal and a purpose. And that goal and purpose, by the way, when he first created it, was it working? Yeah, it was working. If we take a hard look at creation, as much as we possibly can know, before something horrible happened, will we get a good idea of God's mission? Yeah. We get to see in a sense, the finished product. We get a look into the finished product. This is what it's all about. So we have to, you can probably tell we're going to spend a little time in the creation story, you know, because we got to see it. And the world, the story of the Bible says, but something horrible happened. But something horrible happened. And God's purpose, his goal, could not be accomplished as the universe is. As the universe, and it was because of some good reasons. Okay? It's horrible things, but we understand the reasons why. So, he never lost, God never lost that mission. He never lost that purpose. That purpose is there, it's working fine, something horrible happened, and it's like it got spun off its axis, you know? But did God change his mission, his goal? He never changed his goal. He had to alter what? The steps and the actions that he had to take in order to get back to that goal. That's one of the key things to understand in this class, is that God's always had the same goal. And it's reflected in the creation of this brand new, beautiful, pristine world. If you want to see it in action, if you want to see it practically, man, there it is. Now remember, always remember, how is that story told to us? Is it told to us in a 21st century American storytelling technique? It's not. Okay? So we have to take a little time and effort to, go back in time, and we have to, how was that story told? What is Genesis trying to say about that perfect world? And that this is God's goal. This is what he wants. Okay? Does that make sense? Am I throwing too much? Yeah, Danny.
I thought the way that you sort of acted that out last week, or I can't remember when it was, but when you made the statements saying God had his purpose, he was set in that direction, things got messed up, and he said, well, let's just forget that.
Yeah.
And we'll go over here and let's do this. And you were saying, no, that's not the way this works.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great portrayal.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah. That's really, and that was really a key, crucial point in my faith journey. That when I thought and lived out and taught to hundreds of young people and children the story of God and the story of the Bible, I taught for so long, and then God's going to rescue us off of this because his original goal failed. And that just did not, I was standing up there teaching it going, I don't believe that. Well, I don't know, But what else? I mean, you've been there. I don't know anything different. I don't know anything different. So you say it, but less and less did it become something that just doesn't make sense to me. You mean God said, I wanted it this way, but you said, nope, we want it this way. And you said, okay, I'll pull a few of you off and rescue a few of you away from it. But we're just going to burn it up and throw it away and never try it again. What a terrible idea, to try that. And then begin to read the Bible again and say, that's not what happened. Oh my goodness, that's not what happened. That his purpose is still going to be met. And that's why that's why there is so much language that's similar. David, if you want to teach us, so much similar language in Genesis 1 and 2 and Revelation 21 and 22. It's the same place. It's the same place. When you begin to read it. And so he never got off his goal or purpose. Okay? And like I said, we haven't said what that is yet, All I've said is he had a goal, a mission, a purpose, and he rested, right? He rested in it. He accomplished it. Right? In Genesis 2. But something went wrong. And so, same goal, same God, now different proximate objectives and actions to get back to the same place. And in that, it reveals something about him. Question, could God have said, good try? Well, that was a terrible idea. That's the end of that. Could he have done that? Did he feel like almost doing that? Yeah, he did. By the way, he did. There's probably a lot more depth to his thinking about, getting rid of the world, uncreating the world. The flood story is a story of uncreation. The seas fall back on to the land. In Genesis 1, the seas were separated from the land. And then the seas fall back on the land. So it's uncreation story is the flood story. So, but even in that, He was preparing for 120 earth years, you know. He was preparing someone to come out of that alive. So he wasn't saying, he wasn't even saying, just get rid of this. Just forget this. He was saying, we really need a serious redo. And so he was preparing for that. And then he made a covenant with us that said, I'm just not going to do that way. I'm not going to do it that way again. Because probably about every, 30 years it needs to be done, or so, or whatever it is. So does that make sense? God's goal never changes. His mission never changes. And it's very visible in Genesis. We want to remember that. So we're going to look at that. And it's very visible at the end of the story in Revelation. But he's taken some different steps. He's had to alter his steps. Now, did he do that on the fly? The Bible tells us that God foreknew, that he made the plan long ago. He knew something. And that, once again, that's a little bit of a mystery. That's a little bit of a mystery to me, and a little bit, not a little bit, a lot bigger than my mind. But he knew. It was planned. You've heard the old story of the man. Jesus dying on the cross was like the man at the trains who had to decide at the last second between his son or have you heard that story before? And he ran and made the decision quick, I'm going to save the people on the train and kill my son. No, God knew before he even created the world, the Bible says. That's a little bit hard to understand, but it's in his plan. Mark. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's all right. Yeah, exactly. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we've looked a little bit about the word mission, okay? I haven't defined it. I know I haven't said, well, what is that mission, But I've said there's a mission. The mission is a long-term goal or purpose, and that you take steps to get there. And so the other word in this sentence that we need to be aware of is the word God, okay? Lots of people have different views of God. Lots of people have different aspects of God. We've talked about that in biblical spiritual worldview. At least we have an understanding of there's all the way from no God, nature is God, nature and God are equal, there is a God, and most gods are distant. Most theories, when it comes to the side of the spectrum where there is a God, 99.9% of those views of God are gods are out there and we're here. Okay, then you come to this really weird God that you only find in the Bible. Really weird God. He even has a name. Yahweh. Okay? He gave a name to the people that he called. A personal name. And a name that means I am, which is pretty powerful. But this is a weird God, okay? And so to understand the mission, we're going to have to understand a little about God, We're going to have to understand God a little better, who this God is, who this Yahweh is. Okay? And we'll look at a couple of things throughout here that there's a lot of scriptures that we may never have thought about or noticed before that we'll try to think about and notice for a little bit about that this God is the only God, but there's also, he's the God above all the gods. We kind of tend to think he's the God and there's no other God. There's nothing else, The ancient people kind of thought, yeah, he's God, but there's also lots of other gods. there's a bunch of them. And so the language in Scripture seems to be a lot. What? He is the God above what? All the gods. All the gods. That's kind of weird language to us. We're like, but there's not any other gods, you know? And so, yeah, that's one of the things we'll have to stop and get out of the car and go over to the lookout on the side and take a look and observe a little bit, you know? Who is this God that has given so much of himself? And according to the Bible, himself came to this world as one of us and allowed some of his creation to beat him and murder him and execute him, you know. That changes a lot. I promise you, there is no other God in all the different beliefs about God that is like that. There is no God like that. That actually endured human death as one of us, you know. And so, yeah, we're gonna take a look at God, and I'm gonna give you, David, I gave you out the wrong handout. I gave you this is the handout that I've been going through. Y'all have probably been looking at your note going, what in the world? Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot more sense where I've been tonight. The other one was the handout that I wanted to give you now. Okay. Let's take a minute and regroup. But that other handout that I gave you, the first one, just some verses about what this God desires and wants. He wants to dwell with us. He wants to come down to this creation. And we want to know this God. Okay? And so we are capable. We're probably even capable more than we even can imagine how much of God we can know. Now, that doesn't mean we can know all of God. He's too big and too much. But when we look at the statement, the mission of God, we've got to take a look at the God of the mission. Because understanding the God will help us understand the mission. And understanding the mission will help us understand the God, okay, that we're talking about. Is that the last slide? Yeah, this is the last slide. So we're about to embark on this journey. And here's what I wanted to tell you tonight in summary, and we're going to end a few minutes early. We're on the tower. we're within the biblical spiritual worldview, and now we're looking out. We're not looking at the biblical spiritual worldview. We're looking from it. We're surrounded by it, on it. We're safe in its security, in its sturdiness. It can hold us. It can hold everybody. And now we're going to look out, and we're going to see what this God is up to. First of all, who is he and what is he up to is another way to say the mission of God. Who is God and what is he up to? And what we'll discover, if we didn't already know, is that he's up to redeeming, getting this creation back to where he made it. And who is he using to do it? He's using us to do it. That's a mind-blowing thought to me. And so that's what we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at the God of mission. We're gonna look at his mission. We're gonna look where we do mission. We want to understand at the bottom of the handout that I gave you, we're seeking to do a couple of things. To understand the one true God more fully and deeply, and clarify this mission that he is on from the beginning to the end of the Bible story. And then from there, we have a job, you know. He's invited us to participate, okay? And we're going to find as a church that there's ways we're already participating, and we're already doing that. And there's going to be ways that we need to participate more, okay? Because something has gone horribly wrong. And we all know that. We all know something's gone horribly wrong. Whether or not we have some different reactions to that, we can ignore it and I'm just going to live my life and I'm just going to ignore that. We still know something's wrong. Yeah, I'm just going to ignore it. By saying I'm just going to ignore it, there's something wrong, and I'm going to ignore it, okay? We can hide from it. We can blame other people for it. There's lots of different reactions you can have. Or what God has called the church to do is to get in there, put up your sleeves, and get bloody. Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, I hope this was helpful. Does it make sense? Yeah. Good. And if you ever have illustrations that work for you, please share them with me. Like Mark going to that right. Because I like to keep in a folder where I do these things, a list of illustrations and photos that I find and quotes that I find and things like that. So if there's illustrations, this illustration is from me, but that doesn't mean it works for you at all. Yeah. Mark, were you about to say something? Bobby Lynn. Oh, you and then Bobby Lynn. Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's a taste,
Yeah.
but it's a,
Yeah.
this is just a,
Yeah.
if we can show that, can give people, I don't know.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh, that's exciting. Bobby Lynn. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Just done, you have, and I'm like, no, he already knew, like, he still did it,
Yeah.
like, that's the piece that I get from that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the places in Scripture where people just can't speak. Yeah, it's hard to talk. It's hard to, but it's reality that God is that, and He's put that life in us, and now we can go and do that to other people, with other people, and yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. 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 I had a situation, Catherine, this last week where, and then I'll get Mark. Had a situation last week where someone I've known for a while just treated me pretty badly. And I just honestly, well, I'll just treat them like they're treating me. I'll show them what they're acting like. And then after about 10 minutes, and said, this is, you don't even have a say or a life in this. You're dead. You're a dead person. You don't react the way they reacted because you're dead. So what would God do? Because he's the one that's alive in you. And so it was not the easiest thing to do, but I responded to them in the complete opposite way that they responded to me. And things were better. The next 3-4 days later, they were better, you know. And I still didn't want to completely, honestly. I mean, there was still a part of me that was like, I wish I could have just, but anyway, that's where it has to begin to sink into us, you know, that God whispers and said, you're dead. You don't get to respond. You're dead. I'm alive. And so, yeah. Mark.
That's where I'm going to go. And Nehemiah was a cupbearer to King Artaxerxes in Persia. And God gave him a dream to go back to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls. And it just reminds me that that's kind of, we're all invited, well, to dream and to ask God, what is it you want me to do? What do you want me to build? And I think we're all invited, as Tommy's saying, that we're invited to rebuild his world, his creation. And I think we get a little picture of that with Nehemiah.
Yeah.
His task. And it seemed insurmountable. And there were a lot of reasons why it shouldn't even happen. But we learn a lot in that book.
Delinda, I've been trying to think a lot about how all this relates to trauma and those things, you know. I studied trauma some at Biola in California. But yeah, I've just been trying to think, how does this all fit into, more and more deeply. So it's going to be a great journey for all of us to explore, you know, and a great blessing. Yeah, he still came. Yeah.
Disregarding every cost from the manger to the cross, he still came just for me. He still came.
How much do we need poets and artists to put into words that what is true and what we feel, you know? I heard a guy talk one time about that's what's missing from our church is poetry and art and those things, to put it into those pictures that grab our feelings and grab our emotions and things. And that's what that is. That's exactly what that is. That's what happens when we sing. So, all right, we're done. We went a little after 8, but that was not my fault. That was you guys. I stopped at like 7 till.